MFA, we don't want to speak after Kwesi Pratt. So I'm very pleased there was a musical interlude. And he left the stage, give me a caveat that you don't overspeak when the first gentleman is around. But then you gave me a 252-page book, 152-page book, and you spent about months to write it. And I'll try to be as brief as possible. Your Excellency, President John Dramani Mahama, Comrade Chairperson, the author Kwesi Pratt, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. When I look at this august audience, I deem it a great privilege and honor to have been invited by the author, Massa Kwesi Pratt Jr., to review his latest book, Reparations, History, Struggle, Politics, and Law. I'm indeed humbled and honored and grateful to Kwesi for the honor. But I've been wondering, and I want to ask, if I'm allowed, why me? If Kwesi had done some check, you have noticed that this is the first time I'm reviewing a book. Although I've had my books reviewed, I've read reviews, so you can see my trepidation as I stand before you. Your Excellency, even before I go into the meat of the review, let me say that I was literally ambushed to do the review, and I'll explain. And to explain, I need to, because the name I'll mention is not the name that I'm called. You know, now I'm called KABRAL. I used to be called Peter, but when I saw the light, I dropped the Peter and took KABRAL. But in my inner circle of friends and family, and if you ask Freddie Blay, Kukubakon, they have a name for me, Uncle K. It's a special name that has an origin. So we have a chat. Kwesi calls me one morning, Uncle K, I've just published a book on reparations. If I'm trying to imitate his voice, I can't. Which should be launched on 9th September that year. Who will you recommend to review the book for me? Without waiting for my response, he answers his own question. Uncle K, I think you should do it. I'm arranging to send you a copy of the book. That was a trap, because myself and Kwesi come a long way. We've been in trenches together, and he happens to be my uncle-in-law through his wife, his supportive wife, Marian, who is an auntie of my wife. And he is a grandmaster. So I agreed to do it in spite of my doubt about my competence for the task. It is too late. I'm here already. For me to seek refuge in what Jesus Christ requested his Father in heaven to do for him when he faced his crucifixion, to let the cup pass. And so with a sense of gratitude and duty to a brother, friend, and comrade, I approach my task, but with a little prayer, so help me God. And the response is, amen. Thank you for supporting me. My first impression, when I read the very first pages of the book, Reparations, History, Struggle, Politics, and Law, was that only a Kwesi Pratt Jr. could have written this very important book. If you have been watching CNN, there is a Ghanaian genius, it's called Atidobe, Sean Atidobe. I hope it's right. He's a science, he's 10-year-old. And he was interviewed by Dr. Sanji on CNN. And when he asked the boy, when did you develop interest in science? He said, when I was in the womb of my mother. And I want to believe that Kwesi developed his passion for politics, for the struggle, right from the womb of his mother, like the young boy. And it is not by accident of history. Kwesi Pratt Jr. was born into struggle. And I think I've skipped a paragraph, which is very crucial. When you ask to review a book, the tendency is to just read a book and then do a summary. But I think if you want to appreciate the book, you need to look at the man, the author. And knowing Kwesi Pratt, he was born into struggle. His father, the original Kwesi Pratt, was an Nkrumah's trade unionist and activist. With such a DNA, Kwesi's life has been one of committed struggle for social and economic justice. He's an ardent believer in the total political economic vision of Africa and its unification. He has all his life been a campaigner for democratic rights and fought alongside many other giants of our country for the restoration of constitutional rule. From the days of military rule, long before demonstration became popular and guaranteed by the Constitution, Kwesi defied every threat to his own safety and marched with others, and when necessary, organized one-man demonstrations, occasionally with the support of one of his brothers for causes he believed in. For his activities, Kwesi was incarcerated several times without trial, but the walls of cells and prisons could neither hold him nor break his spirit and resolve to soldier on. His political outlook is shaped by the Pan-Africanist ideals of Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, Frantz Fanon, and the other Amilcar Cabral, the original one, and the liberating vision of Karl Marx and Lenin. His latest book is consequently inspired and driven by his progressive political outlook. This book crowns all his battles and struggles for a just and equitable world. The second observation that struck me was the timing. Unlike some of us who are no more in active journalism, Kwesi is still an active journalist and knows two cardinal elements of news: relevance and timeliness. And you need to understand this background when you consider that it was only in February this year when our president launched the AU's theme for the year 2025, which reads Justice for Africans and Peoples of the African Descent through Reparations. I'm sure all the media people here now have a source material to be part of the struggle as we try to make this a subject for morning show chats and evening show chats. Now, to go back, as the records show, the Nigerian business magnate, that's Chief Moshood Abiola, in the 1990s launched a campaign demanding reparations for the crimes of the Atlantic Slave Trade, colonialism and neo-colonialism. Now, the paradox is that although he was making this demand, he was actually an agent of neo-colonialism. But at least, maybe he was trying to do penance by launching that movement. And since then, there have been conferences all over the world, in Abuja, Accra here, in the Caribbean, Durban, all discussing reparations. And as normal, as is a practice, after this summit, there are declarations and quantifications, but they remain at the political ivory towers. The masses are not aligned with all these demands. And so, as Kwesi explained, he has come out with this book, which in my view is trying to bring the masses, all of us, the victims, to back the work of our political leaders. As he said, our president is the chairman of the AU Reparation movement, and he will only succeed if the media of Africa support his work. Kwesi's book, I must admit, is written in very simple, easy to read style, and it seeks to spread the message millions have been waiting for, and by so doing, get the masses aligned with the political elite. As you all know, no political struggle, particularly this one, can be won without mass mobilization and participation. To bridge the gap and create a greater alliance, Kwesi writes in his foreword that this work, and I quote him, is written not just for academics or politicians, but for activists, students, community leaders, and African youth. The music legend and Pan-Africanist Robert Nesta Marley, in his classic song, No Woman, No Cry, advised all of us that in this great future, we cannot forget our past. I want to repeat, and this Bob Marley singing, in this great future, we cannot forget our past. In the midst of all the complex challenges and suffering of modern times, many seek easy solutions and deny that the past has a lot to do with Africa's predicament. Some commentators rather blame Africa's predicament on mismanagement, weak institutions, corruption. Kwesi's book challenges that narrative, whilst acknowledging African politics and leadership is part of the problem. Throughout the 152-page book of profound analysis, backed by historically verifiable facts, he challenges the reader to ponder over a fundamental issue. One of the most seminal books that I read as an undergrad at Legon was titled How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. The author of the book, Walter Rodney, just as Kwesi has done with this book, showed with facts how the world that you see in Europe, in the Americas, are actually world that originated from us. And Kwesi, like Walter Rodney, takes the reader to the very far past, to the 15th century, when an holy trinity of church, royalty, and mercantile capitalism planted the seeds of Africa's underdevelopment through colonization of Africa and the transatlantic slave trade that robbed us of both human and mineral resources. And when you see the forts, the castles standing or dotting our coast from Angola to Benin or to Cote d'Ivoire, they are but saying that these are the vessels or the vehicles through which they exploited us, our resources, both human and the mineral resources. Now, it seems to me that, and I think Kwesi has alluded to it, I'm a little hesitant to mention it, but because I happen to be a Catholic. So when you say Pope, I don't know whether I should also be saying Pope, but it's a fact. It's a fact of history. We all know about the Berlin Conference. That's what most history students know. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, when they partitioned Africa. But long before that, in the 15th century, as Kwesi said, it was the Pope with the papal bulls which paved the way, supported and legitimized the voyages that were undertaken by Columbus, Diego Azembuja, and the rest. And so you cannot discuss the topic without blaming the churches, particularly the Catholic Church. And if there's any Catholic here, I didn't write that. It was Kwesi Pratt who wrote it. Yeah, so I've claimed my penance and absolution before I'm attacked. Kwesi Pratt said it, I didn't say it. But the facts back it. And according to Kwesi, he looks at the effect of the slave trade. About 12.5 million Africans were sent to the Americas, and about 2 million died during the Middle Passage. So, according to Kwesi, slavery defense founded early banks. So when you hear about the top banks in the West, insurance companies, Barclays, Lloyds, they were all funded from dividends from the slave trade. And the system of the slavery did not just destroy our people, it destroyed our foundations, our culture, and so much. And these are issues that Kwesi is able to address. And of course, Kwesi rightly admits that there was some level of African complicity in the slave trade. They were greedy merchants, and simply put, some kingdoms. I don't want trouble. I want peace. But Kwesi has mentioned the name of the kingdoms, and I don't want to mention them. When you buy the book, so to Kwesi, it was that unholy alliance of the church, the Pope, the Catholic Church in particular, the royalty. So when you hear about Buckingham Palace and all the Versailles and the rest, they are all spoils from Africa. And that's why the way he spoke, there was a lot of passion. And I'm not showing that passion, but I think I'm also as pained as all of us in this room. When we read Kwesi's book. But Kwesi doesn't stop there. I think he's written this book as a message and a lesson to us, the current generation. Some commentators talk about the African story as if there was no resistance. So Kwesi included some material to highlight the fact that there was resistance from African people. There is a Queen Kuniziga of, I think, Angola, and for Ghana here, I think we always say Yasantua. But if you look at the history of Ghana, there were Fanti chiefs who actually opposed and sent, did all kinds of things to ensure that there will be no colonization. And I think it starts even with the Karamansa Kwansan, the first chief, the chief of Elmina, when they arrived. When they arrived and they wanted to settle, he asked that, look at the waves, they come and go. I would rather you come and go. Because when you stay here, the implication could be negative for all of us. So there was resistance. And Kwesi provides examples of that resistance. It's for a purpose. It is to encourage us that it is our time. He talks about the CPP. Of course, it started with the UGCC, but the story also says that UGCC, although there were other movements before UGCC, but they lasted only about 2 years. Only 2 years, and the UGCC was gone. And then the CPP took over, and for 12 years, they waged a struggle that led to the liberation, total liberation of Africa. So Kwesi devotes some material on this resistance to colonial rule. So it is our turn. He's urging us to show resistance by joining the movement. And now we come to the main beef of his book, the case for reparation. First, he has provided a historical overview to show that the slave trade, colonial rule, and the rest destroyed us. And then he moves to the case for reparation. And this, he begins by saying that the case for reparations to Africa is really clear and important now. He says, embarks this bold assertion with the moral, political, economic, and legal foundations for the gestation for reparations. With a table to illustrate his case, he answers the question of who owes and who is owed. As expected, those listed as accountable for the high crimes of colonialism and the slave trade are several churches which benefited from the spoils, nations such as Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, and Italy, and several colonial companies. Africans on the continent and the diaspora, descendants of the slave trade,
of slaves who work with their plantations and factories are the ones who are old. For those who know Kwesi and have listened to him on the airwaves since 1995, he is always his own best advocate. And so I want to stick to my one corner, where he has assigned me as a member of the jury and reviewer to cast and explain my vote. I am firm in my view that Kwesi has provided a prima facie case on the charge of crimes against humanity. I should repeat that one. And abundantly proved his case beyond any reasonable doubt against the perpetrators. And here we must ask Kwesi, what are the relief that you are seeking? And again, you have to go into history. At the start of the movement for reparation, many saw it in terms of financial or monetary compensation. But former Senegalese President Abdoulaye Wade opposed any form of monetary compensation as undignified. To Professor Wole Soyinka, the issue of monetary compensations, if it was to be considered at all, like charity, had to begin at home. So he suggested that the Mobutus, Babagidas, and Abachas, and this one is not, I'm not saying it, it's a Wole Soyinka. In other words, the ill-gotten wealth of African leaders should be utilized as down payment. This Wole Soyinka that, yes, let's do the reparation. Let them give us money, but let Africans who have stolen our money and deposited in Europe and Americas do a down payment. Kwesi Pratt backs the case for monetary compensation, citing the established precedent of monetary compensation for the victims of the Holocaust. You know, when you talk about reparation and you ask for money, you say, no, why are you asking for money? Meanwhile, for the victims of the 6 million of Jews that were victims of Nazi atrocities, Germany paid over $90 billion to those victims. And the US paid some monetary compensation to Japanese Americans who were imprisoned or interned during the war because they thought they were going to be spies for their home country. So Kwesi goes beyond mere monetary compensation, which, if we are going to apply to Africa, will be in trillions. If you are going to go for monetary compensation, and I think it's a demand, a legitimate demand, they will have to pay us about millions. Now, to answer this question as to the form of compensation, he has softened models of reparation in chapter 3. I used to be a newspaper publisher, and I know the impact of back-to-back review of newspapers, what it had on our sales and circulation. So if I decide to go through every table, every graph, I don't think you buy the book. So I will leave it to you to just grab a copy and dive to all the issues that have been raised here. Now, he believes that there should be apology. That's the moral side. That apologize for the crimes. Say we are sorry. But it's taking, Britain, the Queen, the King, Prince William, and the rest have not had the courage to apologize to us. And we still believe that such an apology has a healing effect. It will heal them and reconcile all of us. Again, Kwesi cites an example for the CARICOM countries, the Caribbeans. They have a 10-point plan, which, if applied, will be part of the solution. And to Kwesi, reparation is not just a symbolic intervention. It sees it as a liberation process. It's a liberation process that to heal and reconcile both the oppressor and victims. And in the final chapter of the book, he illustrates his case with needed visual maps and graphics which offer concrete models and breakdown for monetary compensation. Kwesi recognizes the struggle for reparations is not the exclusive concern of only Africans, and rightly has a sub-theme in the book on past and current global solidarity movements in the USA, the Caribbean, and the United Kingdom. I believe that such the timeliness and relevance of the book, Reparations, History, Struggle, Policy, and Law, that it could be voted by any panel as the book of the year 2025. And here, the book speaks to the core of the African predicament. It is informative, educative, and analytical. It's a book of great relevance for the struggle of Africa and all peoples of African descent to live in dignity, prosperity, and development. It is a book that also challenges those who stole the wealth of Africa to embark on a journey of penance and restitution for their own sins, for their sins against humanity. In conclusion, lest my endorsement and recommendation, very high recommendation of Kwesi's book, is seen in today's parlance as a family and friend review. I must say that if I had any disappointment, it has to do with the author's silence and omission of what some historians describe as the Arab-Muslim slave trade or the Trans-Sahara Eastern slave trade, which spanned 1,300 years. And there's a body of literature on that. So that massa is omitted, and I believe that in your second edition you will have to address it. And I say this because in key deliberations on reparations in the 90s, Arab slave trade activities came up with some scholars such as Professor Ali Mazrui and Ajay, who were part of the group of eminent persons set up by the OAU to look at it. They played down the Arab factor. And as I write here, I wish Master Kwesi had discussed this issue at length and provided readers like me his views on the Trans-Saharan slave trade, which equally had devastating impact on Africa and its people. But in spite of the omission and silence, this is a book I highly recommend for all those who want to understand the genesis of Africa's problems as we struggle to have a great future. As South African reggae icon Lucky Dube said long ago, millions of people have been waiting for the message of emancipation, the message of liberation, which is embodied in Kwesi's book. I want to conclude by saying that I'm not a prophet, so I don't need any clearance. But moved by the content of reparation, history, struggle, politics, and law, I make bold to prophesize that Kwesi's book will go viral and become a bestseller. And since I know Kwesi believes in the mantra, we create and share, I hope he remembers expected financial windfall and his economic kingdom. I thank you.